Welcome to the Nerdstalgic podcast with your host, the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm.
Howdy beans, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Nerdstalgic podcast with me, your host, Luke the Human. Hope you're doing well, hope you're all good, as per usual. Before we get into today's topic, a bit of housekeeping. So make sure that you follow me on Twitter, or shall we call it X now, but we all know it's Twitter. But anyway, make sure that you follow me on there at nerdstalgic_pod to be kept up to date on everything and anything that I am doing. Also, if you listen to this on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that jazz. One thing I want to say quickly before we start today's episode, before we get into all the fun and interesting comedy and all that jazz, I just want to say today's episode is dedicated to the memory of Paul Rubens, who sadly, as recording this, passed away quite recently. I had planned to do Mystery Men quite a while. It's been on my list, and I wanted to do it a lot earlier, but things sort of came up and I had to push it back. And sadly, as of getting around to recording this, he has sadly passed away. So I wanted to dedicate this movie to him and his memory, because he was in this movie and he played the absolutely wonderfully hilarious Spleen. In every movie that he was in, he was just hilarious. He was always a standout, even like the likes of Matilda. He didn't have a huge role in there, but you always just remember, oh, Paul Rubens is in that movie. You know, so every time he showed up, it was just a joy. And it actually made me realise that I haven't seen any sort of Pee Wee Herman movie in a very, very long time. The last time I've had any sort of experience with Pee Wee Herman was with the Doom Gen ladies, and I think, can't remember exactly when. I think it was either last year or a couple of months ago. They reviewed the first Pee Wee Herman movie. I actually had a fantastic time listening to them. If you haven't heard of them, go check them out. But that's the last time I actually had any sort of experience with anything to do with Pee Wee Herman. So I'm going to have to go back and watch a few, maybe even review some, try my best, because I haven't seen them in a very, very long time. So having that child brain to adult brain, see how it translates. I'm sure it translates, because again, Paul Rubens was hilarious. But because he was in this movie, and he played such a wonderful character, and he was just a wonderful human being anyway, I just wanted to dedicate this review and this episode to the memory of Paul Rubens. So today's topic is we're going to be talking about the fantastic 1999 movie Mystery Men. I love this film, absolutely do. Like I said, I grew up with superhero movies because, again, I was born in 1998, so I was very, very lucky. Growing up, you had the likes of the Fantastic Four, X-Men, Blade, you had Ghost Rider. I'm trying to think what else. There were loads of others. You had all the Batman movies. You had Mystery Men. There was tons of superhero movies. Not all of them stuck. Some of them stuck longer than they should have, and others, were fondly remembered. But for me, Mystery Men was always one of those films that always just stood out. Before the likes, again, of the Avengers, X-Men, Fantastic Four, the Justice League, you had this group of wacky, zany superheroes, characters, and I just kind of fell in love with it because it wasn't the superheroes that, it wasn't serious. It wasn't anything like, it wasn't dark like the DC, or it wasn't overly following it does follow a comic book, but it's not trying to follow a comic book lineage with like X-Men and Fantastic Four. It tried to do something different. It tried to be fun. It tried to basically put a spin on the whole sort of genre of superheroes. Because it's not like what it is today. Like superhero movies today, it is very different. And I say this coming from the heart of a really hardcore, dedicated comic book fan. I've got tons of graphic novels and comic books. I've got all the from Iron Man all the way up to Endgame. I've got all the films on Blu-ray. I love superhero movies. I do. But I will admit, and I wouldn't be wrong in saying this, but the market is incredibly oversaturated. I still love them, enjoy them, because I grew up with them, and that's just who I am, and I love superhero movies. I haven't got bored of them yet, even though Disney Plus and Secret Invasion and all the other sort of sub shows they're doing are kind of really straining my patience. That's a topic for another day. But I still enjoy them. I still watch them. I still get excited for them. But back in like the 90s, early 2000s, superhero movies, were a dime a dozen. They didn't make as much money as they make today. When they did come out, they either flopped or they were sort of somewhat succeeded. Um, I would say for a very, very long time, up until probably Iron Man came out, one of my favorite superhero movies was, I think, it was X Men 2. That was my favorite. And then sort of Iron Man and Captain America and Hulk and Thor, they all sort of started the MCU, and then you had Avengers, and it all sort of kicked off and just blew up. And I'm so glad it has. But for a long time, like you had like Ghost Rider, which was fantastic. I love Nicolas Cage. And I even watched Ghost Rider 2, which that noise that I've just made, yeah, it's all right. Like they rebooted it, but Nicolas Cage was that good, they brought him back. So, but I love the superhero movies. But back in the day, it was just more, no, well, niche. Yeah, niche is a good word. It was like mainly for the nerds. It was mainly for, like, it wasn't mainstream. It's like a superhero movie. Well, I'll probably go watch the like American Pie, or I'll go watch something else or whatever was out during that time. I'm not really going to bother with a superhero movie. So I don't know. I just miss those days of when it was just like a niche thing. I've said this before. Like I like things when they're not popular, and when they do get popular, I get less interested. It's just that with superheroes, because it's so ingrained and entombed in my body and my being, that no matter how popular it gets, I'm still a fan. So that's one thing that has prevailed. But yeah, we're going to be talking about sort of Mystery Men today. I have fun memories of it. I haven't seen it in years. It's not one that's always on the TV. It's actually one of those movies that it's really, really hard to find. I struggled to find a copy for it. I've managed to find one because you'd think this film, because I know it's somewhat seen as a cult classic, somewhat now, but it's really, really hard to find. It's not really anywhere on streaming. I had to dig, and I managed to find a copy of the movie on eBay. So that'll be the copy that we watched today. Um, but it's not one that's always on TV. So it's always, my memories of it are, I remember seeing it when it first came out because it was on TV, and then it was randomly here and there for like a few years shown on TV. Then it just disappeared, and it's like one of my other favorite movies that I love, but it's hardly ever on TV. Is the movie Rat Race? If you ever watched it, fantastic film. I won't go into detail. It was a star-studded cast. It's really, really fun. I miss those type of movies where it was like you've got to get from point A to point B, and the developments in between point A and point B is like little mini sketches with different sort of characters. It's a really, really fun film, but it's a film that's hardly ever on TV. Mystery Men is that same thing. Of when it's on, I sit down, no matter what I'm doing, I'm glued because I know it is a rare occurrence. It's probably not gonna be on TV for another few years. I'm gonna sit and watch it. You know, so for that's cut my memories of it. It's evaded me for years. It's one that I always love whenever I catch it. And I'm just excited to go back and to watch it now and to experience it again because it has been many, many years since I last watched it. I still have fond memories of it. And I remember that I think it was February this year actually that the guy who plays the Blue Raja, Hank Azora, he was asked in an interview if they would ever do a Mystery Men 2, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the whole quote, but I remember he said something under the lines of, "We tried it, but because the movie didn't make, like, basically because Mystery Men, even though it's somewhat held as a cult classic now, it was a box office flop at the time. It didn't make back its budget, and because of that, obviously they moved on." But there was apparently a script out, but because of the reception of the first movie and a lot of all the other actors have sort of moved on, that they basically said, well, there's no point doing a sequel, which is a shame because I would have loved a sequel. I would have loved to see where these characters are now. But again, it's a fact of, you could say, is it too late? Is it too many years? But again, they made Bridget Jones's Baby, which I know is a random thing to bring, but that movie came out years after the second film. So, and there are other movies, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there are other movies that I know that were made years ago and the sequel was made and somewhat did all right. So yeah, maybe it'd be interesting to go back. Like they're doing Dodgeball too. I love Dodgeball, and they're bringing Dodgeball back after that was like 2004, and I think they're currently looking into doing that now. So yeah, there's a potentiality you could bring it back, but it's not as a self-contained superhero fun movie. I think it just works absolutely perfectly as it is, you know. So I'm really looking forward to getting into this one. I really, really am. But that's my memories of the film. Now, one thing I want to try, because I thought it'd be fun, is I'm going to try and do a sort of superhero voiceover, talking basically, um, talking about the blurb, kind of sort of, yeah. Well, it'll make sense. I'm going to do like a trailer voice and of the blurb of the film. It might work. It might not work. I want to try. I want to give it a go. It was a fun little silly idea that I had, and I thought, you know what, Mystery Men is the perfect place to do it. And so if it flops, it's fine because this is a fun movie and we're talking about having fun. So this is my trailer voice. It's probably not going to be great, but we'll give it a go. In order to generate more endorsement revenue, Champion City's resident superhero Captain Amazing arranges for the release of supervillain Casanova Frankenstein. Only to be captured by him, the city's fate rests in the hands of 7 loser superhero wannabes: the fork-flinging Blue Roger, the shovel-wielding Shoveler, the possessed bowling ball-hurling Bowler, the fluorescent Spleen, and the only when nobody's looking Invisible Boy, the mysterious Sphinx, and the perpetually angry Mr. Furious. Yeah, that's my trailer voice. Probably not great or fantastic. I'll work on it. I'll practice it for the next one because this is something I do want to keep doing because I think it's fun. I've done a few practice tries, but I'll give it a go for more ones in the future. So that is to kind of give you sort of a brief idea of the synopsis of the movie. To talk about a bit about the production. In 1997, Mike Richardson, publisher of Dark Horse Comics, pitched the Mystery Men concept to producers Larry Gordon and Lloyd Levin at Universal. Levin quotes that my first impression was just how relatable the characters are. He then said he has a real surrealistic sensibility, but at the core of his work is something that's thematically so identifiable. I think there is an almost childlike presence of the characters, and they ultimately hold on to the conviction that with courage and sacrifice they can become what they dream. The film was announced in mid-1997 along with a raft of comic book adaptations, including there was a lot of comic book movies that were announced and adapted, and some made it to screen, some didn't. But the likes of Blade, Virus, Superman Lives, X-Men, the Fantastic Four, the Hulk, Captain America, the Submariner, Iron Man, Daredevil, and Silver Surfer, Hellboy, Concrete, Green Hornet, and 26 other titles. That was just a few that I found, but there were more. And we all remember Superman Lives, right? Which was meant to be the Nicolas Cage movie, which haven't read the screenplay, but I've heard parts of the screenplay of what that film was going to be, and it just sounds epic. Nicolas Cage as Superman against Brainiac, love it, incredible. Why didn't we get this movie? And it would have been by Tim Burton as well, which I love Tim Burton. Oh, that movie probably would have been a box office flop. I don't care. I still would have loved to watch it anyway. I would have Tim Burton and it's Nicolas Cage. I'm there. No matter if it's a flop, I'm there. But we'll never know. Anyway, that fall, Danny DeVito was in talks for a $13 million deal to both star and direct, but negotiations broke down over who would produce the soundtrack. It was a big deal for me, DeVito said. I really wanted it, so I walked away from the project. Ben Stiller was then approached to rewrite the script and direct, but eventually turned it down. I decided I didn't want to do it, he explained, because it was just too much. It was a huge movie I'd be taking on. Commercial director, who became the sort of whole director of the movie in the end, Kinka Usher, was signed in April 1998 to direct. Usher had won awards for the Got Milk and Taco Bell campaigns. Usher, who had been approached for other films, was discouraged when he saw the script for Mystery Men. I thought it was boring, he said. However, the premise was great. He continued, most of the movies made by commercial directors are heavy on visuals and thin on content. I don't want to be a part of that. I was very cognizant of showing that I know how to work with character. Stiller was originally offered the Blue Roger role, but was not interested in playing what he called a nerdy guy again. The minute you start doing the same thing in comedy, people go, "Oh, I've seen that," he said. He took the role of Mr. Furious, but explained in the original script he was just angry all the time, but I thought that would be boring. So no one. So one of the changes I made is that he has the least power. Like if we're a band, I'm the guy who started the band, but who's also the least talented. Jeffrey Rush was cast in what was his first Hollywood film in July, followed by Hank Azaria, Rubens, Flora, and Marcy. Lena Olin was added in August, Greg Kinnear in October, and Eddie Izzard in November. Others in consideration for roles included Ving Rhames and Vince Vaughn. Rubin said, "I like the idea, hadn't seen it before. I love the cast that was assembled by the time I came into it, and I thought the script was fun, smart and goofy, all at the same time. Regarding his character, he said, I felt I was playing the character as kind of slow, but when I saw the movie, it didn't seem like that at all. I don't know what that says." According to Stiller, the script was fluid. The script was being reworked all the time by everybody because everybody kind of wanted to personalize their part and to try to make it as funny as possible. So yeah, that was welcome. That was the idea we had going in, to just have everybody kind of get together and try to make it as funny as we could, especially in the context of a big action special effects type movie. You know, a lot of the time when what gets lost is the specific character stuff and the small moments that really have to work for the whole thing to work. So that's what we were concentrating on as much as possible, and it's good for everybody on board with that. You know what I mean? And I think Hank, myself, and Paul and Gianna were probably most involved in that process for other characters. For our characters, we'd used to work in that way. Usher said, "We did a lot of unscripted stuff. I let Ben and Gianna go. They were totally free." Usher said he wanted the film to look flat, like a comic book. I tried to capture that alternative reality, but keep the edgy humor. Shoot began on October the 21st, 1998 in Los Angeles, and was completed the following April. Stiller recalled, "I thought it would be quick, but it ended up being this 6-month shoot." Bob Burden was on the set for some of the shoot, answering questions that came up about his creations. There were times when we were kind of stumped in a scene, and we asked him what we thought. Levin said, "The great thing about him is that 10 minutes later we'd get 30 pages in the fax machine with probably 29 pages filled with the lousiest ideas that you've ever heard of. But we'd always have that one page of pure genius. The original ending was unpopular with test audiences, so Usher shot a new one with what he called a big cheer finish." One thing I forgot to do is actually mention the cast. So obviously we've got Ben Stiller as Furious, Gianna Garofalo as Bowler, William H. Macy as the Shoveler, Hank Azaria as the Blue Raja, Kel Mitchell as Invisible Boy, Paul Rubens as the Spleen, Wes Studi as the Sphinx, Greg Kinnear as Captain Amazing, Jeffrey Rush as Casanova Frankenstein, Eddie Izzard as Tommy P. So that's the wonderful cast that we've got. This movie, in my opinion, underrated. Absolutely underrated. But I'm really excited to get into it. I really, really am. So, without further ado, that has been the introduction. I think it's time to get into it now. So, I will see you in the review. Right, so before we get into the review, let's meet our team, the hero team, shall we? So, in the Mystery Men, we have Mr. Furious, the Shoveler, the Blue Raja. I feel like I have to say it in a British accent because he says it in a British accent. The Blue Raja, which I'm already British anyway, so no matter how I say it, it comes out British anyway. The Invisible Boy, the Spleen, the Bowler, and the Sphinx, as well as we have Captain Amazing, who's also superhero in the movie. As for our villains, we have Casanova Frankenstein, who is the main overarching villain. We have Deathman, Father Doom, Apocalypto, Armageddon, Baron Von Chaos, as well as the Disco Boys, Tony P and Tony C. One thing I wanted to do quickly as well before we get into it, I managed to note down the minor superheroes that are kind of mentioned or that are shown within the movie. Some of them I could find myself that you could notice them that have been mentioned. Others I had to go online to do my own research and look into them. So these are all of the minor superheroes that are mentioned or you see in the film. And there's a lot of them, right? So we have the Waffler, Pencilhead, and son of Pencilhead, Ballerina Man, Power Woman, as well as Power Woman 2, which basically is Wonder Woman, really. We also have the Bullfighter, Radio Man, Stilt Man, Squeegee Man, PMS Avenger, Big Billy, Hillbilly, Evil Devil Woman, Global Man, Gorilla, Little Miss Vengeance, Mailman, Martial Artist, Mr. Pups, The Pigs, Pig 1 and Pig 2, Reverse Psychologist, Super Vac Man, The Artisy, Thirsty Man, The Pincher, The Pickler, Princess Headbutt, and The White Fly and the Black Menace, Professor Pinkbelly, Lucky Pierre, and the French Tickler. The one makes me laugh as you go on the wiki as well. Each one of them has like how can I explain? It has like a bit of description. Like for example, Mr. Pups has a bit of a description. He's like the man who would come to be known as Mr. Pups is a resident of Champion City. At some point in his life, he decided to become a superhero and, donning a dog-themed suit, attempted to make a name for himself fighting crime. He attends the superhero tryouts held by the Mystery Men, but he does not make the cut. I can see why with the name like Mr. Pups. Oh, God. Is that... Oh, it's terrible. Absolutely terrible. But I wanted to mention all the superheroes in this movie and the villains and some of the minor ones that I noticed, which just adds to the fun side of this film. As for the actual review, anyway, so we've had our main sort of silly fun. To get into the silly side of the review, this movie is special. It's a special movie that's silly and fun. You know, it makes fun of not just itself, but it makes fun of the superhero genre and how superheroes would possibly work in the real world. You know, it is very silly. It doesn't take itself seriously. It's one of the movies like it's not absolutely fantastic, the best movie ever, but I can understand why it kind of resonated with me at a young age and why it's been such a cult classic now is because nowadays, in the power of hindsight, we know the superhero craze and how it bloomed and blossomed. And, you know, for the most part, in terms of the MCU, it's really sort of blossomed. It's been fantastic, amazing. You know, the most recent stuff on Disney Plus hasn't been so great. It's been mostly hit and miss. But, you know, for a good few years, from Iron Man all the way up to Endgame, it was pretty fantastic. It was pretty amazing. And then, you know, you have the other sort of DC sort of movies that haven't sort of great, but there are a lot of things nowadays where a lot of people say that superhero movies has killed cinema. I disagree with that. But we do have the hindsight of knowing the superhero genre and seeing how the superhero genre and where it's gone and how sort of the media and how like fans and also that treat the sort of genre. Also how the genre has changed, how the Marvel went sort of the light-hearted, bright, you know, serious, but also fun sort of side, just having fun, being a comic book and it just going for it, and as well as DC going the very dark, dreary, very again Snyder-esque sort of everything has to be depressive and everything has to be a tinge of grey. You know what I mean? And this movie really again was ahead of its time. Like a lot of these cult classic movies where they're ahead of their time, making fun of themselves or the genre. People just didn't get it at the time because it wasn't popular. It's not until that genre or whatever it is becomes popular and people rediscover these sort of movies where people go, I can see why this movie is so special and how it makes fun of itself. And it's kind of funny to watch it now with hindsight and be like, oh yeah, superhero movies are quite silly. The superheroes with their powers and their names are very silly. The whole idea behind superheroes, if it was to work in the real world, would be rather silly. But it's fun. It's stupid. It's not meant to be serious. The whole point of how I read a comic book, like there's a lot of comic book stories out there that are very deep and complex and emotional. But for a long time, comic books were just to have fun. It was like reading a book. It was a way to escape. It was a way to expand kids' mind and something for kids to read. And eventually, adults came along and realised that these stories and characters are a lot more in depth than they would first come to see. And it's blossomed and it's grown. The whole superhero genre has really, again, pardon the pun, but taken off. It's flew away and it's blossomed into something quite incredible. So I have to admit, it's quite special for that. But also, I love how it kind of, again, not to go too deep into it, but I like how it questions and puts the idea of the thought for how would superheroes work in the modern world? Would the idea of having do these people actually do they have superpowers, or they are just people who decide that they want to fight crime and they give themselves a costume and a name, and do they just go out and fight, kind of like Batman, just without the money? Kind of like they put a suit on, they give themselves a name, and they go out and fight crime. How would that work? And that's one of the reasons why I love Christopher Nolan's run on Batman so much. I know I'm going off a bit, but the reason why I love his version of Batman so much is because it's a realistic, to a certain extent, view on how a character like Batman would exist in the real world. And the best way I could explain it is the fact if you watch Christopher Nolan movies, that is the real world of how a Batman-esque style character, hero, archetype would work in a modern day setting, in a real world setting, and that the version that we read in the comic books is sort of the comic book that would come out in that world. The comic book version of Batman is the version that would be, delivered and sold in that universe, if I'm making sense. And I like that idea. I like that concept and how Christopher Nolan shot it and how he did that sort of movie, which, again, not to get into that film, it's a completely different movie, but I just like the idea of how a superhero will work in the real world. And in this one, you have one of the best sort of examples is you have Captain Amazing, who when you first meet him, he is, your archetypal superhero. He can fly, he's badass, he looks really cool, he's handsome, he has a double life. When he's not Captain Amazing, he's not, I didn't get his last name, but he's Lawrence. He's a billionaire, he's a lawyer, best friends. He wears glasses, but Captain Amazing doesn't. And you meet him at first, and he's really, really cool. He's really suave, and then you realise he's a big douche. He's an arsehole. All he cares about is corporate sponsors. And I'm not saying that's what happened in the real world, but we've seen what happened with celebrities and what happens with TikTok stars and streamers and all that. It's all about advertisements and them trying to sell products and endorse things. So who's to say if superheroes did exist today that you wouldn't get that? And obviously, if you've watched The Boys, that's a good prime example there when you have VOT, where they basically try to make tons and tons of movies and sell merchandise on these heroes. You would get it in the real world if heroes did exist, if people had superpowers. You would see that. I'm sure you would, because it's advertisement and somebody would want to make some money off something. You know what I mean? So there's always a way that that thing would be sort of what's the word I'm looking for, manipulated. So I find that, for me personally, I find it very, very interesting. But also, again, it comments on the whole idea of an alter ego, how that Lance is a billionaire who is the same person, but one wears glasses and one doesn't. It's akin to Clark Kent, Superman, where people in that universe can't tell the difference between Clark Kent and Superman. The only difference is one wears glasses and one doesn't. And they even comment on it in the movie as well. They're in the diner after their first fight with the Red Eyes. You got Mr. Furious talking to the Shoveler, and Mr. Furious is like, Lance and Captain Amazing are the same person, and the Shoveler's like, no, that doesn't make sense because one's wear glasses and one doesn't, and Mr. Furious is like, well, yeah, but he takes his glasses off, and the Shoveler's like, that makes no sense because if he took his glasses off, he wouldn't be able to see. That's why he wears glasses. And it made me chuckle, not just because of the ridiculous hilariousness of the whole idea between Clark Kent and Superman and glasses, but also the fact of it reminds me of arguments that I've either been involved in or seen and heard other nerds and other people, nerdy people, have this idea behind. This is why trying to rationalize why characters in a comic book don't know the difference between a character with glasses and without glasses. And again, it's that commentary. It's fun. It's silly. And if you're a big nerd, it's one of those moments where like, oh yeah, I've been there. I've had that argument. Oh, I've heard that argument, or so it kind of really pulls you in of like, oh, it's fun. I enjoy it. It like this movie. It's really refreshing to watch a superhero movie that doesn't take itself seriously like modern day movies. This movie knows what it is and has fun with it. Again, it's a whole cliche. It's meant to be making fun of the whole superhero genre. It makes fun of itself. The characters make fun of themselves. The characters, the actors do a fantastic job, and I've got a special mentioning some of the characters, but all the actors do a fantastic job. But it's like, we all know that we're here to have fun. And like I said in the introduction, all the actors were like, we're just here to have a laugh. We ad lib, we add things to the script. We're trying our best to make it as fun and as silly as possible. Because again, it's a superhero movie. It's a satire. It's anything. It's a spoof superhero movie. It's making fun of what superhero movies are or what superhero movies would eventually be and become. Because again, in hindsight, we have seen that if you watch this movie, you can be like, oh yeah, this is what superhero movies are like now. They are very sort of cliche, but again, being as a huge fan as I am, I can admit, yes, I love these. I still love them, even though they're incredibly cliche and at times very predictable. I still enjoy them because I just love superhero movies. I don't think I'll ever get bored of them, to be honest, no matter how sort of dried and sort of prolonged this train goes. And it probably end up going on forever as long as there's money. But I'm sure I'll keep watching them and how boring they get. But yeah, it's just refreshing just to see that you have a movie that doesn't take itself so seriously. That it's a movie that can have fun. And you can just tell the actors themselves are having fun playing superheroes, playing dress up, really. If anything, it's cosplay. These actors are cosplaying as superheroes of, obviously not of their own design, but, of their own sort of maybe. They're like, again, from reading my research from the introduction, potentially their own personalities, putting a bit of themselves into it, having a bit of fun, a bit like childistic mind, being serious, but also being very comedic while trying to seriously act at the same time. So again, it was just really, really refreshing and fun. The only real drawback I have about this movie, and it's not a big one, it's just something that kind of something I didn't realize when I was younger because I was having fun, and I was still having fun here. Don't get me wrong, I was still having fun here, but it's not something that I noticed more now as an adult than I did as a child. Is the fact if this movie runs a little too long. It's about 2 hours long, and it does drag at parts. Again, even though I say I drag at parts, I don't mean that as a bad thing, a bad way. It just feels like some parts are overly extended scenes that are played for comedy and are funny, but there's so many of those prolongated scenes that when you want to get into the action, when the action's there, it feels like the action sort of come and goes too quickly. That there was, again, I know I'm complaining in a comedy that there's too much comedy, but it's like what I said with Love and Thunder. There are moments, again, even though this movie's not overly serious, there's moments where you want to have those character building moments, you want to have those action scenes, you want to have those superhero-ish moments, those fun moments, but there are too much comedy parts, and I'm not saying it takes you out of it, but it's very much of like, okay, I want the comedy and I want the action and I want a good balance. I don't want more comedy than action. Again, I know it's a spoofy sort of silly sort of movie, and this might be contradictory to what I say, but I just feel like it was a bit shorter and a bit more condensed. Those sort of comedic moments would pop more, and the actiony sort of moments would pop more. You could even probably extend the action parts a bit. Maybe the spleen could do a lot more sort of actiony sort of things. You'd have a lot more shoveler moments. You'd have a lot more Mr. Furious moments. So each character would have their own little moments to shine a lot more than they get, you know. So that's my only real gripe with this movie. But again, it's not really a big issue. It's not something that is overly bothers me. It's I'm not going to sit here and go, oh, it's 2 hours long. Oh, it's more the fact of I just wish that it was a bit more short and a bit more poppy at certain parts. But again, it's still a fun film. It's just something I just wanted to mention. Just something that I just noticed. Before we get to overall thoughts, I want to do some character special mentions. First of all, top of the board has to be The Spleen by Paul Rubens. He, I forgot how incredibly fun this character is. Again, it's like I said, it's been a long time since I watched this movie, but he was one of my favorite characters. Every time when he first appeared to the very end, I just loved him. And again, it's a fart joke. The whole idea behind a spleen, he has accurate flatulence. You know what I mean? He will always be able to split the cheese. You know what I mean? He'll always be able to break wind, or however you want to sort of say the word fart. At the end of the day, right, he has deadly accuracy with his backside, shall we say, without going too vulgar. And it's fun. It's silly. It's a fart joke, yes, but it's Paul Rubens, and he makes it so fun. He's like, he's yeah. I don't know what to say. He's pimply. He's got long hair. He looks a bit of a weirdo, and he dresses like he's still in the '60s, like the '60s never died. But it just matches what you would imagine somebody called the Spleen to look like. Like, why would you call yourself the Spleen in the first place? Why not Flatulence Man, which is not as cool, but the Spleen is very Pacific. So you would imagine this is what the Spleen would look like, and Paul Rubens plays the character really well. Again, I would say I've probably watched this movie more than I have watched Pee Wee Herman. So I would say I actually enjoy his character more here than Pee Wee, which I know is probably quite sacrilege to say from many Pee Wee Herman's fans. And again, if you're one of them fans, I do apologise. But that's mainly just coming from the fact of I've watched this movie more. But I love it every time he ever showed up in a film. He was always a highlight. He was always one of those of like, as soon as you saw him there, whether he played a comedic role or he played a serious role, you knew you were going to have fun. That you were going to remember him and his part. They're like one of the great movies that he appeared in that I never realised at first until he shows up. It was a movie, I can't remember the name, that Johnny Depp was in, and I think Johnny Depp plays a drug smuggler, and Paul Rubens plays kind of like a sort of go-between, sort of the drug people as well as sort of being able to sell the drugs. But I don't remember much about that movie apart from, again, Johnny Depp sort of doing his dealings and then eventually getting caught by the police and having to go to prison for the rest of his life. But I remember Paul Rubens, the way he dresses, the way he looks. He actually kind of looks and dresses a bit like the Spleen in that movie as well. But every time he appears, fun. When in Matilda, he's got a small role in Matilda. Doesn't really have that much in the way lines, but you remember him. You know what he looks like. So this character, the Spleen, was played perfectly by him. It's played for laughs. He's a comic relief, but he's fun. He's silly. He's wonderful, and he plays the part fantastically. Also, Paul Rubens, rest in peace. You'll be missed. You will be missed, and I promise I will look into the Pee Wee Herman movies. I don't know if I'll review them because the Doom Gen ladies have done a way better fantastic job than I'll ever be able to do them justice. So if you want to check them out, check out the Doom Generation ladies, the Doom Generation podcast. They do it so much better than I ever would. But Paul Rubens, miss you forever, buddy. Then we got The Blue Raja by Hangazura, which the Blue Raja is just great. Again, there's many times in this where there is that commentary of like, if you're going to be the master of cutlery, why can't you, throw a knife? And he's like, I've told you, I don't throw weapons. I am the Blue Raja. It all makes sense. I throw cutlery. I throw spoons. I throw forks, which again, forks are quite sharp anyway. Like if you've got like, well, if you stab somebody in the eye, that's still quite deadly. Yeah, it might not puncture all the way to somebody's heart, but it's fork in the eye or fork in the bum or leg or in the arm, it's gonna cause some damage at the end of the day. But I just love how Hank plays him. And also Hank, if you know Hank Azura, he does pretty much all the voices in The Simpsons. I don't know if he still does. I think he stopped after the whole Apu issue. But he's a masterclass in doing voices. He does a fantastic job here. He's also a credible actor as well. He's another one of those actors that when he appears in a movie, he's rememberable. You remember him. He's fun. So again, his rendition of Blue Raja works perfectly. And again, I just like the idea when again the whole commentary of like you call the Blue Raja, but you don't wear blue, you wear green. Like at least throw some blue into the outfit a bit. And even when he gets his new outfit at the end of the movie, when he makes his own outfit, it still doesn't have any blue in it. It's a lot more gold and purples and like rouges and magentas and bright colours, but there's not really any blue. Again, he goes. I can't remember it. But he goes into this whole idea between how it makes sense with him being called a Blue Raja, and that the British at one stage had the owned India at one stage in the past, and that the British monarchy was called the Rajas, and it all makes sense of being a British person, Raja, and all that. I can't remember the full spiel. He does it a couple times in this movie. It's fun each time he does it. I just don't remember it. But he's a fun character. He's memorable, very much. Worthy of a special mention. Also, Casanova Frankenstein by Geoffrey Rush. Now, this is a guy who had fun. This is a guy who turned up. He was like, "What? I'm going to play a psychotic villain with a silly name like Casanova Frankenstein. Where do I begin?" He just played it so well, like so good it's bad in a way. You know what I mean? Like how best way I can explain it? Like he played it so well that the sort of ridiculousness of it and the sort of stereotypical idea of what a superhero villain is, and a super genius would be. He plays it so well of like you just instantly believe like, yeah, this guy's off his rocker. This guy's insane. But I can't look away because I'm interested to see what he does next. The way that Geoffrey Rush tilts his head and tilts his eyes up and looks very sort of la yeah. I can't obviously you can't see what I'm doing in a podcast, but I don't know what I did that for. But for anybody who wants sort of an idea, I raised my eyes back and I went la di da like a fairy. It's very much crazy, insane. You could even go as far as Joker-esque the idea, but he's fun. Every character in this is just fun. Even the villains you enjoy. Like you don't want to take your eyes off his sort of take on a superhero villain, because he's not really been any sort of specific villain. He's just playing somebody who is super intelligent, but also incredibly insane, but also is very charismatic, smooth, and fun. But sort of again the silliness of having a superhero and having to have the superheroes that face him, and the idea behind the Mystery Men and Casanova Frankenstein, and actually having a name like Casanova Frankenstein. It's all very sort of on the nose, very sort of silly, but it just works. And Geoffrey Rush, I was had to mention it, like anytime he was on screen I was glued. Like I was like, I forgot how just fun and chaotic he is, and how fun he plays the role. He's a fantastic actor. Again, in hindsight, I've seen him do many things since. And each time, each movie he's been in, he's knocked it out of the park. So to think that you have a sort of high caliber actor like Geoffrey Rush in a movie like this is incredible to think. But he just plays it so, and he does such an incredible job as a sort of archetype, sort of stereotypical superhero, super villainy genius. It's incredible. I love it. I love it so much. Another sort of villain that I wanted to mention is Tony C. Part also the Disco Boys. Tony C. is played by Eddie Izzard, and I'll be honest with you, right? Again, I might lose some credibility here, but I'll try my best to be as open and honest as I always try to do anyway. But Tony C. and Eddie Izzard, for me, he did it when I first watched this movie when I was younger, and every time since, and recently when I watched this movie for the review, he steals the show every time he's on the screen. Like he's just Eddie Izzard is an incredible comedian anyway. If you ever get a chance to watch anything by Eddie Izzard, any of his old stuff or his newer stuff, you ever get to watch any of his stand up, you ever get the chance to watch it. He's hilarious. He's an incredible. He's a powerhouse. He's a great actor as well. He's an incredible comedic talent. Um, and every time his character Tony C is on screen, it's just fun because the music kicks in, and again you can tell that he knows what he's doing. He knows it's silly. The whole idea that he is a character that's set in the future or an alternative future anyway, who will not let disco die, and that he is in sort of disco regalia. The whole flares, the chains, the hair that's swift back, the big bright neon blue sort of outfits. Everything's flashy. The huge go-go boots, which I'm surprised they didn't decide that they could try and put like a fish in them or something crazy from the 70s and 80s. Proper 80s disco. And one of the best moments is that when like Casanova Frankenstein's been released from the insane asylum, he's at home, and he's getting ready. He's shaved. He's cut his hair, shaved his beard off, and then all of a sudden the Bee Gees just start playing, and you just have Tony C just grooving, just living life. One of the best scenes of the movie. Just type in disco room Mystery Men on YouTube, and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's one of my favourite scenes, and he's just there dancing in the disco room to the Bee Gees, and I'm there at home, just like, oh yeah, yeah, just popping and locking, man, just like sitting in my chair going, yeah, I love the Bee Gees, and I know I'll probably lose credibility there, but I'm one of these last few people that really like the Bee Gees. I just love. I haven't got any of their albums. I just like the Bee Gees. Every time they come on, I can't help just not pop and lock and just like, yeah, disco is alive, disco's back, and I think that's probably where I lose my credibility, because one of my favourite lines as well is after sort of Eddie he's done his little dance to the Bee Gees, he's sitting there looking at his record, and also the Casanova comes over, and he's like, I've missed you, Tony. How hard it must have been for you to hear that people say that disco had died. And one of my favourite lines in the whole movie is said by Tony C at this moment. I wrote it down so I make sure I get it correct. He goes, disco is not dead. Disco is life. And I'm sitting there going, yes, disco is life. I said it when I was younger. Disco is life. Disco is not dead. And I say it now at 25. I love disco, right? Disco, I don't know what it is. It just every time I hear anything disco, I just want to get up. I can't dance to save my life. It doesn't matter. I'm just getting up and I'm like doing you can't see them, but I'm currently miming me dancing while I'm sitting in my chair like a sado on my own. But I'm enjoying it. I'm getting into the groove of the disco. So disco is not dead. Disco is life. Like Shrek is life, disco is life to me. So I don't care if I lose credibility there. I love the whole idea of Tony C, the disco boys. Like before they fight, they always do. For example, when they pull their guns out, like Saturday Night Fever, they do the whole down to their waist, grab the gun, put it up into shoot to the sky, and then aim it. Very like Night Fever. If you've seen the movie, you know what I mean. The whole Night Fever. Down to the floor, down to the sky, point your finger up with their guns. It's fantastic. I just love it. Every time the Disco Boys or Eddie Izzard, Tony C, or even Tony P, his companion, every time they're on the screen, it's an instant smile off me. It's like when the spleen appears. It's like I know I'm going to have fun. I know I'm going to giggle and I laugh, and it's ridiculous and silly. But that's what I'm here for. You know what I mean? I'm here for the ridiculousness, and I'm getting it in spades, and it's wonderful. I'm absolutely loving it. And finally, for character special mentions, obviously I have to mention Ben Stiller's Mr. Furious. Again, this character himself is just ridiculous. Like everybody else in the team has some sort of either superhero ability or actually has some sort of skill. The Blue Raja, yes, he's not overly accurate at first with his cutlery, but over time he has amazing accuracy with the cutlery. The Shoveler, again, he's an incredible hand-to-hand combat, not just with the shovel but with his hands as well. Again, the Bowler, the Spleen, even the Invisible Boy, even though you don't really get to see much sort of fight, at least he can turn it invisible. Which, again, the whole idea behind the Invisible Boy is very stupid. Like, if nobody looks at him, or as long as no one's looking at him and he's not looking at himself, he isn't invisible. Which is very, like, even they're like, okay, see you later, bye. Like, it's very incredibly stupid of like, okay, like, we'll call you. Yeah, don't call us, we'll call you, sort of thing. But bless him, they take him on the team. But even he has a superpower. Where Mr. Furious, it's again, it's this very ridiculous way. He just goes up, screams, ah, and then he just tries his best to do things, and he ends up just hurting himself. He doesn't hurt the villains. He falls over, he trips, he ends up getting beaten up. He basically pretends to be a hard man for the whole movie, and then he eventually ends up sort of opening up when he meets sort of a girl that he falls in love with, and he opens up to his mates that he's actually not really this badass that he pretends to be. He's just Roy, but there's nothing wrong with being Roy as well as being Mr. Furious. And then obviously at the end, he does eventually sort of get furious, get a bit angry, and take on Casanova Frankenstein, and saves the day. But this whole thing, like, there were times when I watch it, I'm like, is it just Ben Stiller playing a Ben Stiller character at times? Because everybody else has like a serious sort of moment of they have powers, have abilities, and it's just Ben Stiller just being Ben Stiller, which again is not overly a bad thing, because again, I like Ben Stiller, I think he's hilarious. But there are moments where I'm thinking, is he overacting, or is he just playing himself, playing an archetype of himself at times, you know? But Mr. Furious, he's one of those where it's like you can tell the whole idea behind this Furious character is that he is kind of like he's the leader, but he's not the leader. He sees himself as a hard man, as the badass. But it turns out everybody else is the ones that are the special ones, and he's just there. But obviously because it's friends and all that jazz. That he does have superior sort of strength in a way. He just gets really angry, but it's that kind of thing. He has to find himself and has to really sort of understand who he is before he has to accept his rage, before he's allowed to use his rage and all that. All other sort of metaphors that the Sphinx tends to give them as they're doing their training. But the reason I left him till last is because he is a fun character, but there are many times where it was funny when I was a kid, but as an adult watching it, it's very much the fact of, just like, let's move out the way. Which I know again sounds really bad to say, but it's like move out the way. Like, you've tried your best, you've fallen over, hurt yourself. Okay, now I want to watch the Blue Raja and the Shoveler do their business, or the Bowler, or the Spleen, or the Invisible Boy, or the Sphinx, or anything like that. I want to see them do their abilities instead. You know what I mean? But again, he's still a fun character. It's Ben Stiller being Ben Stiller, and that's never not funny, and it's never not boring. Or never not boring. Does that make sense? It's not boring, should I say? Yeah, it's not boring to see him. Yeah, that makes sense. Anyway, I know what I mean. The point is, I just wish the Mr. Furious character, he's funny as the character he is, but I just want, whenever he was on the screen, I was like, oh, I would rather see the other characters do things as well. He gets a bit jarring after a while, this constant idea of, I'm getting strong and angry. And I'm like, yeah, no, you're not. It's no longer funny. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that. Anyway, my overall sort of thoughts of this movie is, coming back to what I said pretty much at the beginning. It's special, it's silly, it's fun, it knows what it is, and it plays on that. It plays on what it is completely. It knows it's a superhero movie that is taking the mick and having fun out of other superhero movies, out of the superhero genre that was obviously in hindsight was to come, and that, again, as I mentioned in the introduction, all the superhero movies that were announced during this movie as well being announced, I think there was like 24 plus superhero movies that were announced. You can imagine if you were a writer looking around at that time, or producer, and being like, look, there's a lot of superhero movies coming out. They're all trying to be serious. They're all based off like serious longevity comic book series, why don't we just have a laugh? Why don't we just make fun of the whole superhero genre and just be silly, campy, stupid, fun? You know what I mean? And overall, they achieved that. I like, yes, it's 2 hours long and it does get a bit jarring, but overall, I was fun. I was enthralled. I love the Tony P stuff and the Disco Boys. The Spleen, again, Casanova Frankenstein, knocked out the park. Blue Raja, fun. Even at times when Mr. Serious, yes, even when he does get a bit sort of, okay, move out the way. The moments where Ben Stiller gets to sort of be Ben Stiller for those small moments, you enjoy it. And there was even moments where I could kind of feel like there's like Zoolander in there a bit. There's what's his name? Dwight from, is it Dwight or White from Dodgeball? Um, White Goodman, shall we say? There are moments of those characters in there in that film. So it was again, hindsight being what it is. It was fun to see sort of Ben Stiller on his sort of, shall we say, characters journey, working out different characters, different ways of acting, and that sort of thing. So overall, it's a fun experience. It really is. Like, I can see why this is such a cult classic. Do I think a sequel was needed? Not really. When I was younger, yes, because I enjoyed myself. But as a grown up and not, I'm not on a. I don't mean this in because there's too much time passed. There's never ever too much time passed. You could have reboots and sequels, no matter how much time has passed. Because at the end of the day, if that reboot or sequel doesn't work, you still have the original to go back to at the end of the day. But I don't think too much time has passed. I think the reason that you don't need a sequel is that the characters and the story ends where it needs to. The heroes were able to prove to the city and its people that, basically, to be taken seriously, that they can be superheroes, that they are heroes. They also proved it to themselves, but they also proved it to other heroes in the world as well. Like, you can fight crime, that if you have that urge to fight injustice, that you can do it. And also, at the end, it's that funny moment of like, what's your name, who are you? And then the Visible Boy comes out going, "We are the Super Dudes." And I'm like, no, 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 that's not our name. That's a terrible name. It's not us. And then they go, "The Mystery Men," and all that. And it's fun, but it leaves it open where it ends the story nicely, but it leaves it open to the idea of like, these characters have got what they wanted, and you could imagine that they went off and then they sort of saved the day and carried on to being heroes. Really, I think if you was to make a sequel, I think the best way to do it would be keep the idea of making fun of the whole satire behind it, but just have these heroes now that they've retired, that there are other heroes up and coming, and that either they are remembered, and that like, this is all top of my head. I haven't written this down. But you could have it. You could go one of two ways. You could either they're retired and that they're remembered fondly, and that they sort of have that urge to come back, or that all the other heroes have gone, so now they have to come out of retirement to save the day. Or you could have the fact of they're retired and that nobody remembers them, and that they have to kind of try their best to be re-remembered again, and that certain characters have been lost and some characters have passed away or died fighting and that sort of thing. Or you could have characters that are no longer there, like again with the Spleen not being able to bring Paul Rubens back, sadly. You could do something with his character. So, there is you could do a sequel, but I just don't think it would work. I think just the way this movie is and the way it ends, that it doesn't need a sequel. It tells a perfect story for what it is, in its 2 hours, and it ends quite nicely. So yeah, I don't think they need a sequel. But do I think that you should go out and watch this movie if you haven't? Most definitely. If you have watched it, then again, most definitely, please do go watch it again. Especially if it's been a long time. It has for me. I am definitely go watch it. This is a movie that's really hard to find online. I don't know why. I think the only times I ever see this movie anywhere is if I go to like a car boot or charity shop. It's just not anywhere. So I was able to find a copy for it on eBay. But That being said, if you can find a copy, buy it, watch it, enjoy it. Let me know what you think. Um, yeah, that's about it really for the review. If you like what I did here, you want to hear more, obviously make sure that you follow me at Twitter, or shall we say X, which it's just Twitter. We all know what it is. But make sure you follow me there at nerdstalgic_pod. And if you want to hear more of the podcast, just make sure that you'll follow me on Spotify. You can also find the Nerdstalgic podcast anywhere and everywhere that there are podcasting platforms. The only place you won't find me is Apple Podcasts. You can also find me on YouTube. And if you're currently watching this, or shall we say listen to this on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. There will be a pinned comment below. You can either reply to that or comment below. Most likely to be a question behind of what's your thoughts and feelings on this movie, what's your favourite superhero from this movie, all that sort of thing really. So any sort of feedback, put it in the comment section down below, and don't forget to, if you have subscribed, to ring that bell to stay up to date on any time I upload a new episode. You'll get a notification for that. And yeah, so that has been my thoughts and feelings on the Mystery Men. Hope you all liked it. Hope you all enjoyed it. I have been your host, Luke the Human. You'll be listening to the Nerdstalgic podcast, and I will catch you beans in the next one. Bye bye.